March 2026, Phoenix, Arizona hits 106 degrees Fahrenheit. Not in July, in March. The earliest heat dome in recorded American history. The power grid bends. Air conditioning units push to their limit. Emergency rooms fill with heat stroke patients. Officials warn the old, the poor, the sick, stay indoors. Do not turn off your AC. Your life depends on it. At the same moment, 8,000 miles away, the thermometer in Yazd, Iran, reads 110 degrees. But step inside a traditional house in the old city. The stone floor is cool under your feet. The air moves. A child sleeps on a rug in the inner courtyard, a thin sheet over her shoulders. It is 23 degrees Celsius, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no air conditioner, no fan, no electricity running in the walls. There is only a tower rising from the roof, older than the house itself, older than the grandfather who built this wall, older than the country of Iran. The difference between Phoenix collapsing and Yazd sleeping is not money. It is not technology. It is a 2,400-year-old machine that runs on nothing but the wind. Let me tell you something personal for a second. Last August, my air conditioner broke. In Turkey, in a heat wave. I spent 3 days moving from one room to another, chasing whatever thin breeze I could find, pressing a wet towel to my neck like a pharmaceutical product. I felt helpless. I was standing in a building my grandfather's generation would have designed completely differently, and I had no idea how to survive in it without a machine. That is the strange part of modern life. We think we have solved things. We think the climate crisis is a new problem waiting for a new invention. But look at the numbers. The United Nations says global air conditioning demand will triple by 2050. Cooling alone could consume more electricity than all of Africa uses today, for everything. Our answer to heat is to burn more fuel to make more cold, to make the planet hotter, to need more cold, to burn more fuel. The Persians solved this in 400 BC. They did not burn anything. They listened to the wind. And somehow, we forgot. To find the people who answered this question, you have to travel to the edge of two deserts. The city of Yazd sits in the center of Iran, wedged between the Dashti Kavir and the Dashti Lut. Some of the hottest, driest land on the surface of the planet. And yet, for at least 1,500 years, families have lived here, raised children here, kept food fresh here, without fleeing in summer, without freezing in winter. In 2017, UNESCO declared the historic city of Yazd a World Heritage Site. Not for a single building, for the entire living city. Because almost every house still standing in the old quarter is a machine. A machine for living with the desert instead of fighting it. The people who built these machines did not leave their names. They were not architects in the modern sense. They were called memar, master builders. Fathers taught sons. Uncles taught nephews. The knowledge passed through hands, not through books. A memar in Yazd in the year 900 knew how to angle a wind tower so precisely that the cool night air would sink through it by itself. He knew how thick the walls needed to be to hold yesterday's coolness through today's heat. He knew where to dig the water channels so the house above them felt like a cave. He was not guessing. He was carrying a library in his body. For a long time, the rest of the world did not notice. And then, in 1978, a Persian-trained engineer named Mehdi Bahadori wrote an article in Scientific American magazine. He called it Passive Cooling Systems in Iranian Architecture. For the first time in English, the international scientific community read a precise description of what these old houses were actually doing. Convection, evaporation, thermal mass, radiative cooling. Centuries before those words existed in physics textbooks. A young British architect named Sue Roaf read that article. In 1988, she got on a plane, traveled to Yazd, and spent years climbing into wind towers with a measuring tape. She wrote her entire doctoral thesis on them. And then she did something stranger. She went back to Oxford and built a house of her own using what she had learned. A house with thick walls and a central chimney and careful windows. In the summer of 2022, when Britain broke its all-time temperature record and hospitals filled with heatstroke patients, Dr. Roaf sat inside her own home at 20 degrees Celsius. No air conditioning. In 2020, the Iranian government gave her the Farabi International Award, a British architect decorated by Iran, for rediscovering what their own master builders had known all along. This is the quiet truth under the story we are about to tell. The knowledge was never lost. It was just waiting for someone to bend down and pick it up. So let us open the machine. There are 3 pieces. Each one does a different job. Together, they cool a city. The first piece is the bad gear. In Persian, the word means windcatcher. Picture a tall square tower rising straight up from the roof of a house, sometimes 10 feet, sometimes 30. At the top, vertical slits open in 1, 2, 4, or even 8 directions. Each opening is a mouth. Whichever way the wind blows, the bad gear eats it. The wind enters the tower and is forced downward through a hollow shaft that runs all the way to the basement of the house, where the family lives during summer. As the air travels down, it passes over cold stone walls, and sometimes over a small pool of water or a wet cloth. Moving air across water takes energy. That energy comes from the air itself. So the air loses heat as it crosses the water, and by the time it reaches the sleeping room, it is sometimes 15, 20 degrees colder than the air outside. In the Dowlatabad Garden of Yazd stands the tallest bad gear in the world, 33 meters, built in 1750, still working today. And here is the genius no one talks about. When the wind dies, when the desert goes still, which happens often at midday, the bad gear reverses. The sun heats the tower walls. Hot air rises up the shaft like a chimney, pulling cooler air from the shaded courtyard down through the living rooms. The machine has no off switch. It breathes day and night. The second piece is darker, stranger, and I still find it hard to believe when I read about it. 400 BC, Persia. A low mud brick dome rises out of flat desert. From a distance, it looks like a stone beehive. This is a yakchal. The word means ice pit. Inside it, in the middle of summer, in a place where the outside air reaches 50 degrees Celsius, there is ice. Real ice. Cut in blocks, stored in a deep pit under the dome. How does that happen? In winter, the people of Yazd would flood shallow channels of water at night. The desert sky in winter is a radiator pointing at outer space. Water left exposed to that clear sky loses heat by radiation and freezes, even when the air temperature stays above freezing. The workers would cut the ice before dawn and carry it into the pit. The dome above, 2 meters thick at the base, made of a special mortar called sarouge, did not let summer heat through. The pit below the ground stayed cold. So a farmer in July could buy a block of ice in the market of a city that had no electricity, no refrigeration, and no mountains nearby. He would take it home and cool his family's sherbet with it. 900 years before the modern refrigerator. The third piece is the one you cannot see, but it is the reason the other 2 work at all. It is called a qanat, a tunnel. A thin underground channel, dug by hand, running sometimes for dozens of miles from the base of a distant mountain all the way into the city. Gravity pulls cold groundwater through it. The tunnel is lined with vertical shafts every 100 meters or so, for ventilation and for the workers who dug it. The oldest qanat in Iran is in the town of Gonabad. It is 2,700 years old. It still delivers fresh water to 40,000 people today. And here is the connection. Many traditional houses in Yazd are built directly on top of a branch of the local qanat. The water running under the floor is cold year-round. It cools the stone. It humidifies the air the bad gear pulls down. In the hottest week of summer, you can walk down a flight of steps into the basement of a 400-year-old house in Yazd, and the temperature will be around 20 degrees. Wind coming down, water flowing under, ice waiting in the pit down the street. 3 machines, no electricity, no moving parts, just the desert, the sky, and the wind. Now here is the part I love the most. Because you would expect something this clever to require exotic materials, rare metals, sophisticated tools, imported expertise. It required none of these things. The walls of a Yazd house are made of 3 ingredients: clay, straw, lime. Clay you dig from the ground near the construction site. Straw you get from the farmer down the road. Lime you burn from local stone in a small kiln. That is it. These ingredients are mixed into a paste, poured into wooden forms, dried in the sun, and stacked into a wall a meter thick. That wall now acts as a thermal battery. In the day, it absorbs heat slowly, keeping the rooms inside cool. At night, when the desert drops to 10 or 15 degrees, the wall slowly releases what it absorbed, keeping the same rooms warm. A 12-hour delay built into mud. The Badger Tower is made from the same material. The Yakchal Dome is too, with a little extra sarouj, a mixture of sand, clay, egg whites, goat hair, and ash, which turns out to be nearly waterproof and nearly indestructible. People used what was under their feet. There are no mysterious vanished techniques here, no lost tools, no secret formulas. What was lost was the patience. A traditional Yazd house took 3 or 4 years to build. Generations of the same family worked on it. The Memar sat with the owner and asked questions we no longer think to ask. Which way does the cold wind come in winter? Where does the sun hit the longest in summer? Where does the neighbor's wall cast its shadow at noon? The house was shaped to the specific square of earth it stood on. It was not a model that could be copied and dropped anywhere. Let me be honest about something. For most of my life, I thought old meant primitive. I thought a house built by someone who could not read was probably a worse house than one designed on a computer. I thought the machines of my century were simply better. It took me a long time to notice that my apartment cost more to cool in one summer than my grandfather's village house cost to build. The Memar of Yazd did not have my software, but he did something I did not. He paid attention. To the sun, to the wind, to the ground, to the direction of the neighbor's chimney. He built slowly because he understood that a building is a contract with a climate, and you do not sign a contract you have not read. We build fast now. We build anywhere. We build the same box in the desert that we build in the rainforest, that we build in the snow. Then we plug it in and ask it to behave. And we act surprised when the grid fails. Here is where the story turns. Because the knowledge did not die in Yazd, it walked out of the desert. In 1945, in the village of New Gorna in Egypt, an architect named Hassan Fathy was given a strange commission. The Egyptian government wanted to relocate 7,000 villagers away from the ruins of Luxor. Fathy had one rule. He refused to build them concrete boxes. Fathy had spent years studying the traditional architecture of Upper Egypt and Persia. He understood what the Memar of Yazd understood. So in New Gorna, he built houses with thick mud brick walls, domed roofs, shaded courtyards, and small windcatchers, malkaf in Arabic, cousin to the Persian badgir. The houses cost a fraction of the modern alternative. They stayed cool in the Egyptian summer without a single air conditioner. In 1973, Fathy wrote a book called Architecture for the Poor. Today, it is required reading in sustainable design programs from Berkeley to Berlin. Then, in 2010, something beautiful happened. The government of Abu Dhabi began building Masdar City, a planned city meant to be one of the most sustainable in the world. At its center, the designers erected a 45-meter steel wind tower, a modern badgir. When the desert wind hits it, the tower cools the public plaza below by up to 10 degrees. Zion National Park in Utah uses similar passive cooling in its visitor centers. Dubai airport terminals borrow the same principles. Architects in Phoenix, the same city where the grid buckled in March, are now quietly studying Yazd. The machine is coming back, not as nostalgia, as engineering. So here is the promise I made you at the beginning. I said you were going to take something away from this video, not just a story, something you can use. Here it is. Learn which direction the wind in your town comes from in summer. Open your windows to that side at night, when the air is cool, and close them at sunrise. This one habit, done consistently, can drop the temperature of a room by 5 to 8 degrees before the sun even gets high. Thicker walls hold the night's coolness longer. If you are renovating, ask for insulation. Light-colored paint reflects instead of absorbs. A single tree on the west side of your home can cut your cooling cost by 15%. Plant it this year, thank yourself every summer for the next 30. Water evaporating cools the air around it. A wet cloth hung in front of an open window turns that window into a small bad gear. It sounds silly, it works. These are not tricks I invented. They are 2,400 years old. They were solved in a desert by people whose names we do not know. And the solution was so good that a British professor built her own house around it, and an Egyptian architect rebuilt an entire village with it, and a skyscraper in Abu Dhabi now wears a modern version of it on its roof. When your air conditioner breaks, you are not as helpless as you think. Your ancestors were not primitive. They were patient. They were listening. And now, because you listen too, so are you. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.